the last time we spoke, you you said, what is the similarities between prime time and complex stories? Is that where we start this?
We could. I think I'd like to do that very quickly because we have the play session after all.
Yeah.
And so, in your mind, is more important than any. I'm interested in you talking about that difference. If let's pick a big one. What do you think? I mean, I don't have one in mind. I'm asking
Mm.
you, in your view, what is the relationship between the games? I mean, specifically in how they work.
I think, I mean, the overall similarities has to do with agency and has to do with. I don't think that we see that much of that in the first session,
Mm-hmm.
because the first session is quite much about me building upon what you gave me
Right.
in the character creation. But I think that is very much. It's much more obvious when you play further on.
Okay. In what way? What is the variable or the mechanic that
I mean, when you and I and the rest of us played Prime Time, I mean, the main mechanic is someone sets a scene,
yes, the one from the
and
narrative.
that setting a scene is a concept. But you might as well say, okay, what do you do now?
Yes, that's true. But one of the nice things about Prime Time Adventures is that it specifies the what do you do now,
Mm,
because it explicitly hands the player the ability to be in a spot and to
exactly.
be doing a thing with no element at all of anybody saying, oh, but first,
No.
or anything like
or
that.
I mean, in a lot of the old school, we were always a party.
Right.
So the question was, what do you do now? Is
It's a
directed to
collective.
everyone.
Right. So
It's a
there now
collective,
needs to be a negotiation about this. Yeah.
and when you say, okay, now it's your turn, what please set the scene. That also kind of gives you it kind of makes this. I would not say that it forces you to make this like the shortcut, uh, like,
No, but you have the opportunity to make a
yeah,
fast cut, a
exactly.
profound cut, if you want.
But I mean,
Yes.
you know, the film Shortcut,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I
uh,
do. I
yeah,
do. Yeah.
where you have like very many separate stories
I see what you mean.
being
Yes.
woven in,
Yes.
and and
Hmm.
and, and I think that's a very it's in prime time that becomes kind of a thing,
Yes.
because everyone, they you kind of take responsibility for your own character development, and then the times they intervene, that's more of your
Right.
the producers, and we kind of get like, please take the characters that are in the spotlight this session
Right.
in hand, so it gets mechanically drawn into that, but it's quite hard to do that as a player.
Well, it
Some
it is, I think, done in many role playing games, especially of the older type, without anybody really acknowledging it, right? Without anybody really calling attention to it. And there's always the role of that negotiation factor, whether it's with the game master or whether it's with everyone else.
Yeah,
So almost a way of, well, what do you want to do? And of course, the response in many cases is always framed as a supplication. Can I do this?
Yeah.
Right. And so in Primetime Adventures,
And I
there's no
think
canon.
for me, this is something that is really, really interesting as a game master and a game designer, because I think, and Primetime is
Right.
it kind of points out that, because
Yeah.
when you ask that question, what do? You're both asking the individual and the collective.
Yes.
And I think in most role-playing games, in contrary to most like movies and stories, we have a group
Right.
of people
Group is
with
a part of the picture, right? And theoretically, even in the older games, you don't have to do that. There's literally nothing preventing each person from running off and doing something fully individualized, and then you just do the regular cuts that you did anyway.
Yeah.
Even when they were a collective, you still made cuts from scene to scene. So what's the difference? But again, the textual ability to do that is absent. There's no textual acknowledgement of this whatsoever. And furthermore, there's the I have my terminology. Situational authority is my terminology. So my argument about the word authority is that it can be distributed around a group to different people, through some organized way, or it can be concentrated in a person for that particular kind of, authority for situations. And in the case of Primetime Adventures, it does a very nice job of saying it is distributed in several different ways. First of all, it's distributed in terms of turns. Second, within each instance, it's distributed back and forth between producer and player. The player provides this, the producer provides that. And so it is useful to examine that and now to say, okay, we haven't done it in play yet, but what is this like in terms of compact stories? Not that it's supposed to be the same, but how do you maintain that same kind of, player role in that kind of authority? So what is it?
No, I think I think I have a plan to add that to the construct. But what I'm doing right now is that I'm more or less testing other things.
Right. Okay. Well,
So what I'm doing now, and I understand that I'm doing that, is that I'm kind of relying on my own Fingerspitzgefühl.
Yeah.
So I'm the parts that are not taking care of structure in the game, I take responsibility as a game master.
Right at the moment, and then there are some of those where that responsibility may well just remain as is in some cases.
Exactly, and you can. So for an example, I have like which card do we choose in each phase?
Right.
That's one of I don't want to make a decision.
Right.
I kind of narrowed it down, and you can choose the ones with this, but I want this to be. I don't want to make rules before I play test it a lot of times.
I completely agree about that. And besides, we have those mechanics to concern ourselves with, and that's what I really want to talk about. And so this isn't really anything to do with Primetime Adventures or any comparisons. This is merely my real question for wanting to talk to you, especially before we play the next session. Why did we never use the dice in session 1?
It's a very good question, and the reason I'm pausing is that I'm like going through all the first sessions that I've had.
Hmm.
and I think I've never used the dice in any first session. I don't think so, at least.
Are there in our session any events or moments of play which, in retrospect, would have been eligible for a dice roll? Because as I understand the game, I can think of two, but I don't know what you think.
Yeah. I am now thinking of both the session we played and all the session I played, and I'm not also session I played from like when I started doing play sessions, but in the recent
Yes.
iteration, and I think it might have to do with because risk of going on like a sidetrack here. I when I played Compact Stories with you, and when I play Heroes with you, I also realized that the overall concept of compact stories, the compact thing, maybe that is a kind of a design framework that is not at all relevant for this game. The eagerness to do it on a 5-hour session, that was one of my first, and I really felt that I got really stressed out by that. And when I started playtesting it with other people, it's still supposed to be a short story,
Right.
a couple of play sessions, but it doesn't have to be 5 hours, especially not when we like playing over
Well,
Discord.
yes. I mean,
and,
I
and
think that the 5 hour, uh, not necessarily convention, but it might feel like a convention. The idea that
yeah, but I
you
mean,
sit
5
down
hours
with
is a
you sit
convention.
down with people and you say, "This is a one shot. We're here for
Yeah,
the 5 hours."
yeah,
That may or may not be an ideal to preserve. I'm not saying, oh, you have to get rid of
no.
that. It may or may
What,
not
what,
be to
what
preserve, but it's worth pointing out that you have realized that it is stressful.
especially for me as
Sure.
both a game tester and a game master,
No, yeah,
and what I'm and in this stage, it might be where I end up in the final like iteration,
right.
but for now
Maybe it's
I
not the
really
priority, right? Right.
no, but I really need to understand my game, and if I'm continuously like trying to push the story forward, it, for one, we lose a lot of agency because I'm as a game master,
You're just telling us what's happening. Yeah.
or I at least, or I'm kind of stressing. Okay, what do you do? What do you do? I'm trying to like push everything forward, and so I felt that in the stage where I am right now, I felt that I had to slow things down. I I
That's
really
interesting
I really
because, yeah,
and what I and
yeah,
that
go ahead.
might have and that might have and now I'm coming to the answer of your question. That might have resulted in me spending some time prepping in a way where I kind of take what you have given me through selecting cards and all that, and kind of try to push not too much, but mm, the things that I want. So the first session is more or less uh, me me saying, okay, you gave me this, now I give you this back.
I get that, and
Mm,
I understand it. And I
mm,
want to say that what I'm talking about next, or my response, is not arguing against that idea.